All right, let's talk about something well, it's a huge paradox right at the heart of how we're fighting climate change. It's all about the money, billions and billions of dollars. But there's a pretty big catch hiding in plain sight.
So let's just jump right into the big question here. How is it possible that climate aid could actually be pushing the countries that need it most deeper and deeper into debt? I mean, that sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? A system designed to help is somehow creating a whole new kind of crisis. And this is where we see this massive gap between what's promised and what's actually happening on the ground. To really get this, we have to go back to the original idea. See, the whole concept right from the start was that this money, it isn't supposed to be charity. Not at all. It's meant to be a currency of justice, a way of saying, hey, we're going to make this fair. It's about responsibility and, balancing the scales. So the system is supposed to work like this. It helps the countries that, did the least to cause climate change, but are getting hit the hardest by it right now. It's basically a corrective measure for this massive global problem we all face. But the big question is, does it actually work that way in the real world? And this is where the story takes a turn. Because when you start digging into the numbers, into where the money really goes, things they get weird. A pretty confusing picture starts to form, and it looks nothing like the principles we were just talking about. So, clue number one is what the money is being spent on. Turns out more than 60% of it goes to what we call mitigation projects. Think big stuff, like building solar farms or wind turbines in developing countries. And this really shows the problem in black and white. Mitigation is great, don't get me wrong, it's essential for the planet's future. But it does absolutely nothing for a farmer whose crops are flooding right now. That farmer needs help adapting. Building seawalls, finding crops that can survive a drought. And that's exactly what the most vulnerable countries are crying out for. But just look at the chart. That kind of funding is getting a tiny fraction of the money. It gets even stranger, though. When you look at the patterns, you realize that how much a country is suffering from climate change, it doesn't seem to be the main reason they get help. It's like the most vulnerable aren't automatically at the front of the line. Something else is going on. Some other factor is driving these decisions. And boom, here it is. This is the core paradox, laid bare. The goal was always to give grants, money with no strings attached, to the countries that need it most. But the reality is that a lot of this aid is actually loans. Loans that have to be paid back, with interest. And who gets them? The countries that are seen as bankable, the ones that are a good bet to pay the money back. So you have to ask, right? How does this promise of justice get twisted into something that looks a lot more like a business deal? Let's pull back the curtain and see what's happening. Well, the answer really comes down to the powerful gatekeepers of this money. We're talking about multilateral development banks, or MDBs. Think of institutions like the World Bank. They're the ones channeling most of this climate finance. And, crucially, they play by a very specific set of rules. And their rules are not what you might expect. Instead of looking at a country and asking, how vulnerable are you to climate change, they're looking through a totally different lens, the lens of financial risk. Their main questions are things like, is this country creditworthy? Can they pay us back? And of course, they're worried about their own bottom line, their portfolio performance, and how much risk they can take on. So let's just trace the path, step by step. A country in crisis asks for help based on the idea of climate justice. That request goes into this big institutional machine, the MDB system. And inside that machine, it gets run through all these financial risk tests. What comes out the other side? All too often, it's not a grant. It's a loan that creates debt. And here's a really subtle but super important point. It's not that these banks completely ignore a country's suffering. They see it. They acknowledge it. But it's like they put it in a little box. It's considered, but it's not the deciding factor. At the end of the day, it's the financial logic that wins out, not the desperate need for climate aid. Okay, so this whole institutional filter thing, it's not just a one-off issue. It actually kicks off a really dangerous feedback loop, a kind of trap, really. And once a country's in it, it's incredibly hard to get out. So, step one is what you'd expect. A country is getting hammered by climate change. We're talking more storms, worse droughts, you name it. It's starting to take a serious toll. Naturally, because things are getting worse, they urgently need money. Money to protect their people, rebuild what's been lost, and adapt for the future. So they go looking for that climate finance we talked about. But remember that institutional filter? Because of it, the help that arrives is often a loan. with a bill attached. And now they have to pay back these loans, plus interest that eats into their national budget, right? So suddenly there's less money for schools, for hospitals. And here's the kicker, less money to prepare for the next hurricane or the next drought. They become less resilient, not more. And just like that, the cycle starts all over again. And that's the trap. It's this climate debt trap, where the very money that was supposed to help ends up making a country's financial situation even more fragile. It's a system that, in a terrible irony, can make the original problem even worse. So all of this brings us full circle right back to our first question. And it forces us to ask, what does climate justice really mean? Not just as a nice idea, but what should it look like in the real world? Well, if you break it down, true climate justice has three main pillars. And this table, it really lays out how the current system is failing on every single one. First, you have distributive justice, basically giving help based on need. The system fails because it's focused on bankability instead. Then there's procedural justice, giving everyone a fair say. That fails because the MDB's rules end up silencing the most vulnerable countries. And finally, corrective justice, fixing the harm without creating new harm. And it fails there too by creating these massive debt burdens. What this all points to is a really crucial takeaway. You can't just throw more money at this problem and hope it goes away. The issue isn't really the amount of money, it's the fundamental rules of the global financial system. It's the actual operating system that's the problem.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough final question, doesn't it? If the whole system is built to put financial risk before human need, can it ever truly deliver justice? Can this system be changed from the inside? It's a massive question. And honestly, the answer could define our entire global response to the climate crisis.